It will soon be 3 years since Israel launched the genocide in Gaza and in the West Bank and South Lebanon and attacked Iran. For much of that time, Turkey and the Arab world held up their hands in horror but did nothing. Do you want us to start a war with Israel? The collective cry of the impotent went up. I heard this many times in Ankara, which continued to allow oil from its closest ally, Azerbaijan, to go through a Turkish port into the eager, waiting hands of the Israeli military. Turkey did stop an Israeli and US-inspired armed ground invasion of Iran by Iranian Kurdish militias, and Saudi Arabia has refused to normalize with Israel, absent a credible path to a Palestinian state. But for much of those 3 years, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had a free hand. The Turkish army retreated when Israel bombed and invaded southern Syria. The Arab League was impotent, the Gulf Cooperation Council non-existent, until last week. What finally pushed the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who had spent billions investing in the US President Donald Trump, to sign a mutual defense pact with Turkey and Pakistan, will be a matter for historians to ponder. But at a guess, I would say the Chinese have it right. There has been no official comment from the Chinese Foreign Ministry, but the official Xinhua agency put it like this: America is unreliable. Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan sign a defense agreement. China could have seen this pact as an Islamic NATO, but it didn't. Its experts think, rightly in my view, that Trump's failed attack on Iran not only prompted Arab nations under its military umbrella to question America's actual military strength, but also America's ability to protect them. So the conclusion everyone draws is that the Gulf states had to have the ability to defend themselves. On paper, at least, a military pact between these three powers is formidable. Pakistan, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia have respective nominal GDPs of $452 billion, $1.1 trillion, and $1.3 trillion. Between the three, they could field over 5,600 main battle tanks, over 1,100 combat fighter jets, a fleet of drones, ballistic missiles, a nuclear deterrent, and well over 1 million battle-hardened soldiers. Each partner in the Mecca Agreement has a different motivation. Pakistan, which is battling at least 2 insurgencies, needs money. Pakistan's army is finding its military strength becoming an economic asset. It also needs a strategic counterweight to India. The point was not lost in New Delhi. A former Indian Foreign Secretary, Kanwal Sibal, described the pact as a very negative development for Indian interests and said India should expand its strategic options with the United Arab Emirates, Israel, Greece, and Cyprus. Turkey needs a nuclear deterrent, particularly against the almost daily Israeli threats that they are next in their sights. It also needs to help the new government in Syria force a withdrawal of Israeli forces from southern Syria. Its high-tech military-industrial complex needs markets. But Turkey clearly sees this pact as a counterweight to the American project to install Israel as the new colonial governor of the Middle East. If this military pact had one author, it surely would be the Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan. A day before Erdogan flew off to Riyadh in great secrecy, Fidan warned Israel of the dangers of international isolation. He's saying that Israel's free ride is coming to an end. Saudi Arabia needs a lever over Iran and the Houthis in Yemen, which have recently closed the strait at the mouth of the Red Sea and has begun bombarding oil fields in the Saudi kingdom. MBS's plan to modernize the kingdom has repeatedly hit a brick wall with all the wars, all the fighting that's going on around his kingdom. But the common thread in all of this is that America has become an unreliable security partner. Close behind that lies the conclusion that an isolationist America is uniquely incapable or unwilling to rein in Israel. This conclusion is brought home to America's Arab allies almost every week. Israel collapsed the Memorandum of Understanding Trump signed with Iran in June, which bound the US to stop all military action on all fronts, including that of Israel's in southern Lebanon. working through a rival faction in the Washington administration to the one that signed and promoted the MOU, Israel signed a deal with the Lebanese presidency, although not with its government, which allowed Israel to continue its military operations in southern Lebanon. Within 24 hours of signing a nuclear cooperation deal with the Saudis, Trump inserted a demand that the kingdom had to normalize with Israel first. Then came the agreement the Board of Peace signed with Hamas in Gaza. Hamas said it would hand in its heavy weapons to the new Palestinian administration of Gaza, but only to be logged and stored, and all this would happen after a full Israeli withdrawal. Israel applied pressure, and the Board of Peace, who signed the document, immediately started rewriting it. It now said that withdrawal and decommissioning would proceed simultaneously, and that all weapons, light and heavy alike, would have to be destroyed, and not simply logged and stored. Not content with forcing a rewrite of the deal, Netanyahu came out on Sunday with a straight rejection of the plan that the Board of Peace had negotiated for so long. The Board of Peace's reaction to that? Oh well, we'll have to go back to the drawing board again. What happened repeatedly under Joe Biden is now happening to Donald Trump. If anything, Trump's weakness and his frequent changes of mind and U-turns is spurring Netanyahu on. The same thing is happening to Trump's on and off talks with Iran. Trump went into this war on Israeli intelligence that the Islamic Republic was so weak after the January uprising that the regime was low-hanging fruit which would fall at the merest touch. The opposite happened. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, became stronger under sustained attack and now feels it's in a position to dictate terms to Trump about the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. On Saturday, the Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, Mohammad Bagher Zolgadeh, said that Washington would have to lift its naval blockade and sanctions, withdraw US military forces from the region, pay war reparations, and release frozen Iranian assets before the strait reopened. On Sunday, the IRGC said it now regarded the strait not just as a waterway, but, open quotes, a theatre of war. End quotes. Trump is balking at going back to war, but equally cannot get Iran to open the straits on anything like his terms. Now, will the Mecca Agreement have an immediate impact on stopping Trump walking away from whatever deal he has signed, or stopping Israel blowing up any ceasefire? Not immediately. On Sunday alone, the Houthis said they had targeted Saudi troop concentrations in Yemen's Red Sea coastal city of Mocha with ballistic missiles and drones. But if this alliance really does come into operation, it will strengthen the hand of regional negotiators with Iran and over time shrink the space in which Israel can operate. On Gaza, it's been clear from the start that Israel and Netanyahu had a different agenda than either Biden or Trump did, and that each president did nothing about enforcing the United States' will. Biden, Trump, and now the Board of Peace all maintain the illusion that Israel's object is to disarm Hamas, after which they will withdraw. All see and describe this war as temporary. Israel's purpose has been very different. It does not want this war to stop. If Hamas is disarmed, Israel would continue to arm its proxy militias in Gaza. They would continue to try to stoke a civil war and drive millions of Palestinians into the sea and permanent exile. Israeli ministers have made no secret that the real aim of their offensive is to engineer a large-scale voluntary migration from Gaza. The model for what could still happen in Gaza is the withdrawal of the PLO from Beirut in 1982. Before the PLO withdrew from Beirut, it required assurances from Israel and America of safe passage and the safety of Palestinians in the camps, an assurance that would be underwritten by guarantees from the US State Department. These assurances were written down. They were contained in 2 letters from Philip Habib, President Reagan's special negotiator in Lebanon. Both the Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin and Bashir Gemayel, the leader of the Phalangists, were in on Habib's talks. Upon Begin's answers, which Gemayel endorsed, Habib and the State Department issued its guarantee to the PLO. On September the 14th, Gemayel was assassinated and the Israeli army stormed into Beirut. The following day, an Israeli general, who was one day to become its new Prime Minister, Ariel Sharon, sat in a tank and lit the way with flares for the phalangists to enter Sabra and Shatila refugee camps. Between 2,000 and 3,500 refugees and Lebanese civilians were killed in 2 days. What happened in Sabra and Shatila has etched a deep scar in the Palestinian memory. Palestinians should not allow this to be repeated with Hamas, nor with the population of Gaza. The Mecca Agreement is a much needed, long overdue start to a new security order in the Middle East. Even at birth, it faces huge obstacles. Turkey tried hard to get Egypt to be a founding member. Egypt said it balked at entering an alliance which it saw as political rather than military. It also said it was too anti-Israeli. But I have also other sources that tell me that Saudi Arabia could have objected to Egypt on the grounds that the Egyptian army was too weak and that it was too closely allied to its rival, the UAE. These inter-Arab strains are precisely why we're in the situation we are all in. Israel's plan to push millions of Palestinians into the sea affects the Sinai and Egypt more than any other country in the region. It's abundantly in Egypt's interests to join this pact, because ultimately the core issue is not an America in decline or what Israeli troops are allowed to get away with in Palestine. Ultimately, it's about Arab and Turkish and local sovereignty over their own land and their own people. Either the region is doomed for another century of colonial domination, this time by Israel as the satrap, or it's really time for the three biggest powers of the region to break this cycle. If a pact with this military, technological and financial weight falls at the first hurdle, each Arab government knows it will be the next victim of an Israeli-inspired war.